Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, and I'm your host of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, your host, and today we're here with Victoria Pelletier. And she has been a firecracker, I would say, in terms of being able to climb the corporate ladder and CEO at 24 years old, right? So without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself to our guests?
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And so I'll try and do an abridged version, but I feel like there's a lot to cram in there.
Okay.
Yes, I am a career-long corporate executive. I started working very early. So when I got recruited at age 24 to my first executive role, I still had a number of years of experience under my belt at that point. I've stayed predominantly in the world of B2B professional services, but I've also built and bought companies along the way. I've always had a proverbial side hustle. I sit on multiple boards, both for-profit and not-for-profit. Currently just one that I'm on, which is a not-for-profit called helpusadopt.org. I'm adopted, so it's one of the ways in which I choose to give back. I am an author, a professional public speaker, and personally, I'm a wife and a mother to two grown children, which makes me feel really, really old because I'm not even 50 yet, and I'm now an empty nester. They are 24 and 20. I'm a bit of a fitness fanatic and a foodie and a wine lover, and I'm also a dog mom.
You are so accomplished. You've done so much. And so how did you find the time to be able to sit on all these boards, start a company, be the executive? Because I know what that's like. And so how do you find the time?
A few different ways. First of all, I have this saying that where there's conviction, there's capacity. And so for a lot of people I hear, I can't get it done. There's just not enough hours in the day. And this is where I will challenge them. I sign a lot of my social media posts with hashtag no excuses. And by that, what I mean is we make choices. So for me to be a fitness fanatic who chooses to work out early morning means I have to get to bed early at night. So I don't get to stay up watching, Netflix till all hours of the night. When my children were younger, and it was still very much a work in an office culture, I tried to leave the office by 5 or 6 o'clock, get home, have dinner with them. And then when it was time for bed, I then hop back online for a couple of hours. So that's how I've chosen to do it all. But it's also by setting great boundaries. So the things that are not bringing me personal or professional joy or value, I started to say no to, or I delegated it or outsourced it. And so, for example, when my kids were young, my ex was working as well. And so we had a nanny when the kids were younger, and that certainly helped. Or my mother-in-law before that. My ex unfortunately passed away a number of years ago. And when I got remarried, my husband was a little uncomfortable with the fact that I had, cleaners who not only cleaned the home, but did our laundry. And he was like, oh, and I was like, well, babe, let's be clear. Doing the laundry brings me no joy. It has significant value. So in this case, I've chosen to outsource it. So I was like, you can either get comfortable with having the cleaners do your laundry. I said, or you can start doing the laundry. And I will tell you, are soon to be together 11 years. He still does the laundry to this day.
Wow.
Yes. His choice.
That's good that he was able to communicate. He didn't feel comfortable and that he was willing to step up and do it. Good solution. Okay, so what are some of your key experiences that has shaped your no excuses philosophy? Because I like that you have that hashtag no excuses. I agree with it.
My children don't always love it. I will tell you that. And many of my friends and my team members, first of all, it comes from I'm born into some pretty horrible circumstances. I'm born to a drug addicted teenager who was very abusive to me. I'm fortunate that I ended up being removed and adopted out of that situation. But my adoptive parents, are lower socioeconomic position, which is part of the reason why I started working at age 11. And I remember my mom is the woman that raised me. She said to me, I think when I was like 10 or 11 years old, she's like, Tori, you need to do better than us. And she meant getting a good education by vocation. But she didn't have to tell me that. So in fact, my no excuses, I think, although I didn't have the vernacular at 11 years old, when I sort of had this mindset was, I'm going to be better than either the biology I was born into or the circumstances I'm in. I'm not going to let anyone prevent me from achieving like the goal or objective that I set for myself. So one, I'm very clear on what that is. And although we can't control all of the adversities or challenge that's going to come our way, we are always in control of how we react or respond to those. And that doesn't mean I don't like suffer like great emotion. Like I'm such an extremely emotional individual, both anger, sadness, all the emotions when something happens. But then I choose to move beyond that and drive towards, again, whatever that goal or objective I've set for myself. So I think some of it for me is my circumstance. Some I think is DNA. And I've just learned to step into a zone of the things that make me really uncomfortable. That's actually where I find like the magic happens in terms of like opportunity and growth.
Yeah, it is so true. There's something, and I do believe that we're all called to do something as well. And my husband lost his job earlier in the summer, and I'm like, oh, dang it. Now that I know that there's a purpose, I know that there's a reason, and I know exactly what it is. And I'm still fighting tooth and nail because I know what I'm supposed to do. And I just, it's those type of things. And there's no excuse. I take full responsibility. I cannot blame a single other person as much as I would love to. Actually, I'm not that person, but it's just interesting how some people do. They choose to use excuse after excuse after excuse. And if you could just say, suck it up, buttercup, and like who is responsible for your life? It's no one but yourself. And so I love that philosophy. I 100% agree with it.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about leadership because you've written a book called
The Power of Whole Human Leadership.
Okay. And tell us what it's about.
So I left my last company last year, and I had co-authored a book at that point, but I was determined that at some point I'm going to write a book. And I debated between two topics, and wisely, unwisely, I'm not sure. I decided to write both. So I actually wrote one on personal branding that came out earlier this year, and this one on leadership, which is just so close to my heart in that I've not always had great examples of leadership myself. When I entered the workforce, it was very much this command and control hierarchical way of operating and less care and empathy. And then over the last number of years, and actually particularly with the pandemic, I saw that the workforce was demanding something different and better, quite frankly. And I also wrote the book because stepping into that first executive role at 24, I was a brand new mother. I was the only woman. I was the youngest by a couple of decades, and I'm publicly queer. I was married to a woman for 11 years. I happen to be married to a man now, but at the time was with my wife. So for all those reasons, I was like, I felt like I had enough of the world against me that I didn't need to show emotion. I didn't need to show vulnerability. I was learning from what I saw on television and that command and control style that I entered the workforce into. And I got a nickname as the Iron Maiden a few years later. Now I'm very strong at performance management. I also have a nickname as the turnaround queen. So I make businesses, run well. And I've always been focused on some of the elements of I talk about in the book around diversity and inclusion and trying to create a sense of belonging. But the thing that was missing from my own leadership style was being empathetic, being vulnerable, showing emotions. And in doing all of that, those are the things that actually build trust with people and create a stronger sense of followership versus someone doing something for you because they're told to, they want to. And so that's why I decided to write the book, to share the failures that I've made and what I've learned from them for either new leaders or those that are kind of stuck in the place that I was, but also recognizing that today's modern workforce wants something very different.
It is so true. I think back when I started running the colleges and running departments and doing those things even running my own classroom, because I used to teach college. Some of the things that I demanded from my students, I probably would never get away with now, because I feel like respect is kind of lacking a lot more lately. So say that some of our listeners, they're starting out and they're starting to hire their first people, or they have multiple and they have a culture issue where leadership is definitely lacking. What advice would you give them?
I'd give the advice that I wish my 20-something-year-old self would have listened to. And I say that because I'm not sure if my 48-year-old self now went back and told the 24-year-old girl something. I'm not sure if I'd listen, but I would hope. And that is very much sort of foundationally that it is okay to embrace, and it's why the book is called Whole Human Leadership. It's okay to embrace our entire humanity. And by that, it means the experiences we've had, the adversities we've faced, and not be ashamed by them. It's okay to be authentic and vulnerable with others, and stop fearing not being accepted or, feeling rejection. Like that's number one. I think when you sort of shed a lot of those barriers, that's where more naturally the stronger, leadership aspects come out. And I find myself, I've been a lot of the last many years consulting, like my business. I worked for Accenture and before that IBM, and been in the world of consulting. And some of that's been in the human capital space. So working with leaders on their workforce, on culture, and saying there's not a trade-off for being this kind of human leader with strong performance. Yeah. That said, I also embrace the phrase, title of another book by Kim Scott called Radical Candor. Right. So, it's finding that balance of being that authentic, vulnerable, leader that can be really transparent but direct with the team from a place of care and compassion. While still, being clear on, what our performance expectations are and how success is going to be measured. You bring those together, and again, incredible things happen.
So true. I used to direct colleges, and there was one that I took over, and it was a very tight knit, like these people had been there for actually their whole career, 10, 20 years. And there's this one girl, she had not been there that long, but you mentioned the word queer, which I have not heard in a very, very long time, but she was gay, and she actually grew a beard. And so by 5 o'clock, she had this like actual shadow and everything. And then she was overweight. And so there's all these things stacked against her. And so whenever I walk into a company to be the leader, I will ask 3 things, and I interview every single employee. I don't care if there's 10, I don't care if there's 150. And I will ask 3 questions. One is, what's going well? One is, if you had the reins, what would you do differently, or what would you change? And the third is, where do you see yourself in 3 years? And those 3 questions, I mean, she broke down and she started just crying. She goes, Charisse, I want to teach so badly, and they will not let me. And so I made it my mission. I mean, I fought hard with corporate, and it was because they couldn't get over how she looked, how she behaved, or whatever. And by the time that I left that place, it was about a year later, she was actually one of the teachers, and one of the best teachers that we had. And so I find it's interesting when you can try to pull people in by asking their opinions, by seeing, because I know when I used to be just this lowly teacher, we would meet in the parking lot after 11 o'clock at night and talk about how we would change. It was like the soap opera. As the world turns, it was as the insert name of school turns. And we would plan all this stuff because we were in the trenches with those people. And I think sometimes as leaders, we lose sight of that because we spend so much time in an office because we're so overwhelmed with things. And so if we can get out and ask people questions, and I love how you talked about empathy and making sure that you have all inclusive, the entire human being, that to me is very important. I agree with you.
Thank you. Actually, I have I call it the unseen employee, rather than, although I refer to DEI more broadly in the book, which, by the way, the only negative ratings I have on Amazon for the book are for 2 people who really don't like the fact that they thought it was purely leadership, and somehow I've woven in all these woke, I think one of them might have used that term, DEI terms. Anyways, I refer to it as seeing the unseen employee. And in your example, okay, maybe it was they were judging her for how she appeared, but there's lots of things we don't see behind the veneer. People don't show it. We don't spend time to learn it. And so that's where I think it's really important as a leader to like lean in pretty closely and be curious about others. And I love your question over like, where do you see yourself? That's a great one.
Yeah, because if they want to be here, great. If they want to be able to move up, let's get them on a plan. If they don't, that's good to know too.
That's right.
So you can start backfilling if you need to. So, okay. So how do you apply resilience and personal development strategies in your current leadership role?
So in addition to talking maybe about some of my personal adversities, I've also been through 40 merger, acquisition, or related transactions in my career. roughly half of those directly companies I've bought and sold, or the companies I worked for where I've directly been involved in what those activities, and the others have been in support of clients and on their journey. So I have a lot of firsthand knowledge around how do we need to be resilient in the times of significant change or transformation. And also having worked the last many years in consulting and technology, as well as we've seen that change, I've sort of developed strong principles around one, how do we manage change? And a lot of that comes down to, most people think change management, oh, I've got like a project management office, and that's about having some good comms, communications, and a solid project or program management plan. And there's so much more to that. For me, I developed, and it can be applied both personally and professionally, this kind of 5-step plan or framework, I should say, to resilience. So the first is just to be really clear on whether it's from a business, the strategy, it can be, or otherwise at a personal level, it can be as simple as having that career goal, financial goal, fitness goal, whatever it is. You have a goal, objective, or a vision for yourself. One, that's always your anchor, and gains to help you with clarity around where you're going towards, and kind of that no excuses mindset. The next is being very self-aware and incredibly self-reflective. When you have the emotion, when some kind of change is triggered or some condition, whether it be world and the wars going on, or the economics or whatever, that are impacting, like how does it affect you? How are you feeling? Taking stock of that, to then do the next part of that, which is, I have a phrase, I use it frequently for many things, including in this like resilience framework: strategic intentionality. If you're clear on your goal, objective, or framework, then you should be taking actions. Your thoughts, your language, your behavior should all move you forward in progress towards that goal or objective. The fourth is surrounding yourself with community. And so whether in the work context, that's the coaches, the mentors, and the sponsors you have around you, or in a personal life, it can be having your own personal board of directors, a combination of family and friends. And in some cases, it might be professional help you need, depending on the kind of trauma or adversity you've had, who will support you on that journey. And they should also challenge you. Are there some blind spots you don't see, again, as you're working through that kind of self-awareness piece? And the last one, and this one was a really big one for me because I was such a perfectionist, is giving yourself permission to fail. We're going to. So as much as I said, you can control your reaction or response, there's a lot of things that are uncontrollable. So you might get derailed temporarily. But again, if you go back to step number one, in terms of being really clear on what that, that vision or goal is for yourself, then that should just take you back. And then doing that over and over again, it's not comfortable. But again, as I said earlier, like stepping into that discomfort zone is actually when I think greatness happens.
Those are great steps. So I mean, it's amen. That's all I have to say. Like that's a great way to kind of end it, because it's good advice, and if people actually listen, they could be very successful at it. So it's great advice. So let's talk about that, because you actually probably don't even realize you answered a question that I usually ask at the end. You talked about if I were to go back and talk to my 24-year-old self. So we're going to do it as a mom, because we didn't really talk about mom at all. So I want you to imagine yourself sitting on a park bench, and this 9-month pregnant, I always want to say old lady, but no, 9-month young mom, she comes and sits right next to you, and you get talking to her. And if you could give her any advice, since now that you're an empty nester, you've been through the gamut, if you could give her any advice on momhood, what advice would you give her?
There's so much that goes through my head. There's probably two that I'd say. One is just that I wish I'd impressed upon my children much earlier on. They sort of saw my career and where I was going, and I don't think I ever put that pressure on them, but I think they have felt it. And so I think I would have done more to, talk around to my children around being their, whole human selves, and, success being defined in their own right. In the way that makes them happy. Because like I said, I feel like felt a little bit of a burden on that. And so I wish I would have started those conversations earlier. I've certainly had them. And the other is like, sometimes that as a mom, like best laid plans, like things are still going to go all awry. Like sometimes I look at my two children and I'm like, had I not given physical birth to both of you, I might question whether like my DNA was in there. You were raised the same, yet Very, very different. So like I've gone like, what could I have done? I'm like, you know what? We're all human. So they're, gonna come out and be very different. And I think to some extent we do our best. And for me at the end of the day, if I'm proud to say I raised two really good human beings who've chosen, their own path to make them happy.
That's great. And speaking from someone who has 6 kids, yes, it's sometimes, and 4 from a first marriage as well. And one that was like, we separated when he was 3. And I think he has more of his dad's personality. And you have to understand, like, his dad never came around. He never picked him up. They never went and spent every other weekend and one night a week. They just didn't, because he's a party dad. And so he doesn't want to be burdened by that. And so it's very interesting how DNA and personality, I mean, there's a lot of similarities. I want to go back to your first response, though, with that. You said that you felt like you burdened them, like giving them pressure to be successful, or what do you mean by the first part that you talked about?
So the fact that I come from nothing, so I've given them the things I never had. There was no money to go on vacations when I grew up. And so I gave them a lifestyle that I didn't have that came easily. However, I made them start working for anything extra. So yes, did they get phones early on? Did they go on vacations? Yes. But when they wanted the extra stuff, I made them use their allowance or the money that they had earned. However, both of my children have told me in different ways that they have felt a pressure to perform or do or be something more because of my career. And in fact, before I moved, I'm originally from Canada. And before I moved, I've been back and forth between Canada and the US for work the last 20 years. And before I moved back to the US in 2019, I was on a national news channel regularly as part of like a weekend business segment. And so they knew I was well known. And so I remember my older son at one point saying to me when I was pushing him, he wanted to go into engineering and he wanted to get to the top Canadian engineering school. And I was like, buddy, you're going to need to work really hard. And I remember, and this is when I was just like, oh, wow. He pointed around our house and he's like, Mom, I don't need all of this. I'm fine with mediocrity. And then later he went on to tell me like I want a house and a wife and a dog. I'm like, well, buddy, those all cost money. So we do need to kind of push you a little bit more to get the grades to get into the school that you want to get to. And he subsequently told me when he was then in college and I was working for IBM at the time, I said, I can help you get an internship. I said, I'll open the door. You have to get the job. That's what I do. And he said, Mom, and I just been named one of the top 50 leaders in technology. And he said, Mom, I'm really proud of you, but I want you to know I don't want to be you. Kind of hurt. And I don't think he meant it in that way at all. I think the pressure of the career I've had, the stuff I do in media and beyond, they felt it and in moments where they don't feel like they're performing.
I can relate. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think as a mom, like you do want to be able to give them as much as you can. And you do want them to be able to, I'm going to start to get emotional. Like you want them to be successful and you don't want them to have to struggle. And so when I went through the divorce, I mean, I was doing very, very well. I was supporting, like the house was in my name. I was supported the kids. He walked away and didn't really ever support them. And I was okay with that. It's hard to watch though, because they feel abandoned. So anytime their dad gives them attention, they're like latch onto it. And here's a man who's over 50 and he doesn't have a job. He lives off his parents and still to this, and so does his older brother. And so it's interesting to watch. And like, I do, because you do want to push them because you know what it takes and you know the hard work and you know what life is like. But at the same time, it's like, okay, they have to have the same path you have in terms of they have to learn along the way and they're willing to do whatever. And so sometimes I do. I'm like in high school, I was voted most involved, like stupid title, whatever. But I did everything, right? And they don't. And so it's hard to watch sometimes, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I cannot live vicariously through them and I cannot push them to do something that they don't want to do. Like, why don't you want to play basketball or why don't you want to play sports? But one person's very musical and another person's like, Mom, I just don't, I want to do crafts, and
Yeah.
it's hard as a mother to try to have that balance and that juggle. And I think no matter what we try to do, we're going to do it wrong. But then we also did it right. So, you did the best you could with what you had. And I think that you're an incredible example to your children, and they recognize that and they'll appreciate it, especially when they have kids of their own.
Yes.
I think I look back at my mom and I'm like, oh my gosh, that woman is a saint. She got up every single morning and made all 4 kids plus her husband lunch. We always had dinner. There was chores like we were given lists. And I mean, the things she accomplished, she ran circles around me is how I feel. But I didn't realize that until I had kids. So it'll come around.
I hear them come around. Even my younger one, who actually said to me a matter of months ago, Mom, you know what? Like, you're actually almost always right. I was like, what? Hold on, let me get my tape recorder. Like, get my iPhone out. So, and he's only 20. So I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So yeah.
Wow. See, you did do well if he already recognized 20
right.
and he doesn't even have kids. Yeah. I'm assuming he doesn't, maybe.
No.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I really enjoyed talking with you. You have great advice. You have a ton of experience. And I think that what you've been able to accomplish and what you give back is incredible. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And if our listeners want to learn more about you or find your book, how do they get a hold of you?
The easiest one-stop shop, so to speak, is my website, which is victoria-pelletier.com. They can buy the books there. They can just read some of the content. Many of the podcasts I'm on will be there. But it also has the links to connect with me on the other social platforms as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much. And Unbreakable Moms, you can do it. #no excuses, right?
That's right.
Just keep going. Every single day is just a blessing that we are still here, and you can do what you want to accomplish if you set your mind to it. So go out and make it a great day. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.